Hey guys, back again. So let's do another Thrill Me Thursdays, and I'm so glad this time because we have our top 5 part 2's in horror. So that is the second sequel in a horror franchise, top 5. And I am so excited because there's so many part 2's that I love, and this was a very hard list to choose because there were a lot of ones that I wanted to put on here that just didn't make the cut because I just chose between the ones I really genuinely love. So let's get on to it. Number 5 would be Scream 2. To me, Scream 1 is fantastic. I love Scream 1 and I love Scream 2. 3 and 4 are just okay. But Scream 2 in particular, I thought just does a fantastic job of doing what the first movie did, but just further elevating the characters and further upping the ante with the gore and the effects and the fact that this movie, spoilers for Scream 2, the fact that this movie is a worthy sequel in which it is the continuation of Billy Loomis, in which his mother is the killer, and her losing all of her family to Sidney and her mother in more ways than one is such an incredible way to have a killer. I love the fact that with that in particular, I just love that character. I love Laurie Metcalf's character. She's fantastic, and I love how Sidney is this character that further elaborates on what she was in the first movie and how in this movie it's happening again, and she is a fighter. Like, she is not taking any shit. She is a fighter and is going to stop this killer. And I really love with Cotton Weary being brought back, even though he's in 1 second of the first movie, and like he is further elaborated on. And I love the fact that before you know who the killer is, the whodunit angle I think is done very well. Like, who is this killer? Like, there's gotta be some, like, what is the reason for all this happening again? And it makes total sense when you realize it's Mrs. Loomis. I think that this is just fantastic. I love Scream 2. Number 4 is a movie that everybody hates. I'm not gonna give any... Like, I'm not going to deny that at all. Man, I fucking love Exorcist 2: The Heretic. This movie is one of the most interesting movies I've ever seen. It is like you're watching a dream. Like, the way that this movie is directed, I think, is so fantastic. It is so interestingly made. And I love how John Boorman, who just came off of Deliverance... which had an Oscar, I believe. Like, Deliverance is fantastic, and he just came off of Deliverance, and he brought all these giant people into this movie. Of course, Linda Blair is back, but he brought in James Earl Jones and Louise Fletcher, and he brought in all these big people for a movie that people hate, and I completely see why. It is an interestingly strange movie. Like, it is very strange, but I love the dreamlike feeling of this movie. Ennio Morricone does the score, and it is incredible. Reagan's theme is one of my favorite themes ever. I love the fact that this, if you love or hate this movie, I feel like this movie is so ballsy and so interesting in a way where you honestly have to commend it a little bit. And I do, for sure, because I love this movie. I love how fascinating it is. I love how interesting it is. It's just a very fascinating movie that I love, and it's so underrated because people say it's one of the worst movies ever made, but this has filmmaking to it. It's got fantastic visual effects, fantastic cinematography. I feel like people would argue with the acting and the dialogue because it's so strange, but to me that adds to the dreamlike state of this movie. I love this movie. It's fantastic for me. Number 3 would be Sleepaway Camp 2: Unhappy Campers, one of the best slasher sequels ever because of the fact that they go in a different direction, in which the first movie was funny in a way. Like, it was goofy unintentionally or very intentionally in some ways with some of the performances, but in this one, this is a full-fledged black comedy. Like, it is outwards a comedy, and I love that we've got a serial killer who cracks one-liners, and it's this girl named Angela Baker, like from the first movie, or her name is Angela Johnson in this version now, but she is back and is a preppy, a very just chipper character who's a serial killer, and she has one of the best performances in any horror movie, Pamela Springsteen, and she is so hilarious, so likable. You love her even though she's a serial killer. Like, she's horrible, but you love her, and she's so funny and so hilarious. The kills are good, they're effective. Really love Sleepaway Camp 2. Number 2 would be Psycho 2, one of the most underrated sequels ever, because of the fact that Psycho 1 is a masterwork by Alfred Hitchcock. Like, it's one of the best movies ever made. So people look at this and just think, oh, it's good. I think this is one of the best sequels ever, and I think that it holds just as well as the first movie for me because of the fact that they further, again, like Scream 2, they further elevate the story in which Norman Bates comes back home, starts hearing his mother again, but then there is somebody killing, and it's not Norman. I love how it's another mystery movie. Like in the first movie, you didn't know who the killer was. You thought, or people thought it was Norman's mother, even though it was Norman. And in this one, you don't know who the killer is, and it's a very cool bait and switch where Norman is not the killer in the movie. Or it's implied. They do it very, very smartly, where Tom Holland wrote this and he does a fantastic job. But they do it very smartly where Norman isn't in the room, but then he has an excuse for it. And it really messes with your expectations on, did Norman do any of this? And I really love that. I love how smartly written this movie is. I love how Richard Franklin did a fantastic job directing it. It feels very Hitchcocky, and even though it's not Hitchcock, because he died like 3 years before this movie was released, but still, this is a fantastically made sequel. Fantastic character arc for Norman. Love all these characters. I love Lila Loomis back. I love Meg Tilly so much in this movie, and I think she is fantastic as Mary, and she is truly got a fantastic performance as well, and she's so underrated in this movie as well. Everything about this movie is underrated, is what I'm saying. Go see Psycho 2 if you have not seen this. I love Psycho 2. Then my number one is one that's kind of really obvious. Halloween 2 from 1981. This is one of the first horror movies I've ever seen. I have seen this movie probably the most out of any horror movie. And I've seen the first one almost just as much, but this one was on TV on reruns a lot whenever I was younger, and I watched this so much because this one showed more than the first one on the channels that I watched. So I can't say much about Halloween 2 besides the fact that I love it. It's fantastic, one of my favorite sequels ever, and that is my Thrill Me Thursdays. And thank you guys again for joining me, and join everybody else. Go check out everybody else's videos that Drew from Hey, Isn't That Devon Graham is putting in his playlist. So that's it, and thank you guys so much for watching.